Good morning. Welcome to Hometown Heroes. This is Rick Irving, and I have Mary Staffeld.
I'm
She's been
back.
out, we've been out, and we're back. And today, you know, we talk about Vietnam and we talk to a lot of veterans, but what we would like to do is have our veterans tell stories, not so much about, hey, this is great things I did, but kind of show the horrors of war because that was a terrible war. Lost over 58,000 people. Millions and millions suffered not only physical, but emotional, psychological injuries from that war. And today we have Bill Pugh. Many of you recognize Bill Pugh. He's been on several times, and he's kind of what I think, one of master storytellers. I mean, as he describes things, you think you're right there with him. So Bill, welcome to Hometown Heroes, or welcome back. We're glad to have you.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And if I could get started, my first story is um, basically about a soldier that came into my unit. His name is Thomas Stanley. And I was in the Central Highlands in Vietnam. I got there. My first firefight was probably about the 10th of January of 70. And by March, I've gone through quite a few other firefights. And now we're looking at probably about mid-March. And in mid-March, I'd been promoted to a squad leader. And my squad at that time, because of DEROS, guys leaving, guys wounded, guys killed, I only had 6 men in my squad. So the first sergeant came to me and said that he had found that I had a new man joining my squad. His name was Thomas Stanley. And he gave me a little bit of a background on him. He said that he had killed a man in a bar fight with a knife. The other man had a knife, and he was convicted of manslaughter. And he was sentenced to like 5 or 6 years in prison. Or he could join the United States Army. For 2 years. He had to serve 1 year with an infantry unit in Vietnam. And if he did that and got an honorable discharge, then the other charge of 5 years, that would be expunged or erased from his record, or he didn't have to serve it. That his year in Vietnam and 2 years of service in the Army would serve as his sentence. So I thought, I had just become the squad leader, and I thought, why me? Why me? And when I met this guy, it just made my blood run cold. He's probably 6'1", 185, country strong, and he had Charlie Manson eyes. When he was looking at you, he was sizing you up and on how to take you out. And when I introduced him to the rest of the squad, he immediately became a loner. He didn't talk to anybody. There was hardly any interaction at all. And I thought, oh, Lord, I'm going to have trouble with this guy. And the other guys didn't really like him either. So it was kind of a mutual thing. But he never said a word. But in our first mission out in the jungle, depending on how many guys were in squad at night, you circled the wagons, you dug your foxholes. Well, your squad, if you had 6 guys, you had to break up 6 hours or how many hours of darkness that night with how many guys you had. So every night, one of us, at least for an hour, had to serve guard duty on the foxhole. And so it came time for Thomas Stanley to do his thing. And he came to me and said, you need to be with me. And it's just a bizarre request. Like, I'm going to have to sit there with you for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it was, and basically kind of like babysit you. I didn't tell him that, but I thought this is really, really uncomfortable. And so I don't really remember how it started, but that's what happened every night with him. I sat on the same foxhole with him, or in the same foxhole. I would sit at one end, he'd sit at the other. Not a word was spoken. But he could not serve. He could not do it by himself. And of course, I started getting a lot of heat from the rest of the guys in the squad, talking about babysitting and that type of thing. Of course, they would never say that to him. But I took a lot of heat for this. But also, I had sleep apnea, and I didn't know it at the time. I had a horrible time sleeping in Vietnam. I was tired all the time. And so sitting up with him for that extra hour didn't really hurt me, because if I laid on the ground at night, I started snoring so badly. Guys were kicking and punching me. I usually had to sit up against a tree, and that negated a lot of the snoring. So actually sitting up with him didn't bother me, although at the start it was really uncomfortable and not a word was said. Well, now, towards the end of April, Nixon ordered the troops into Cambodia. And so now we find ourselves with my squad. There was 8 of us, and one of them was Stanley Thomas. We're at Plagerang, and we're ready to be air assaulted into Cambodia. And 10 miles into a landing zone called LZ Fox. And the battle order on May 6th was that the first company to be inserted air assault was Charlie Company. And then right after their insertion, Alpha Company that I was a part of, we were being inserted. So we were all anxious. Nerves were running high. It's kind of like before a football game or a sporting event that you're going to enter into the, your adrenaline's flowing, the butterflies are there. You just want to do whatever you have to do and get it on and let's go hit somebody and get it over with. And so our platoon, we were the 3rd platoon of Alpha Company. We had found a tank in Plagerang. It was part of the defensive perimeter, and we'd all gather around this tank, and it had a radio, and we could follow the transmissions between the air crews and Charlie Company about their insertion and how it was going. And as it went along, the insertion was not going well. So my platoon, about 30, 40 guys, including Stanley, were all around this tank listening to this radio. And it became very obvious 10 minutes into it that LZ Fox, which was about 10 miles inside Cambodia, that was the landing zone that we were going to establish a fire base. Charlie Company was getting ripped. The ground fire was just immense. They managed to only get about 55 guys on the ground out of 100 and maybe 40 in their company, and the rest of the insertion was called off. And one of the first birds into LZ Fox with Charlie Company on it had been shot down. So this whole thing added to the tension, and the delay and the waiting was just killing us. Well, out of this whole atmosphere came Thomas Stanley, screaming and yelling at me that he was going to die in Cambodia. And I mean, this man never said a word to anyone. It was almost like the pressure or whatever it was, he cracked. And he just kept screaming at me that he was going to die. And the first sergeant came over and basically said, you either shut him up or get him out of here. And so I grabbed him, and we went over about 10 yards to a pile of boxes of ammunition. And I sat on it, and I looked at him and said, what's going on? And he just kept repeating that he was going to die in Cambodia. And finally, I couldn't talk him out of that. And I just said, well, how can I help you? What can I do? And he handed me an envelope, and it was a letter. And he gave it to me, and he said, you got to promise me that when I don't make it out of Cambodia, that you mail this letter. And I said, okay. And I put it in my fatigue pocket. And he just kind of slumped over and never said another word. So I walked back to the tank to listen to the conversation and the traffic that was going back and forth on what was happening with Charlie Company. And the thought hit me, well, how does he know that I'm going to make it out of Cambodia? None of us knew. Long story short, Lieutenant Phillips organized Charlie Company, the 55 guys on the ground, and they fought their way, he created a defensive circle of the men, and they fought back. And also there were airstrikes, I understand, and there was also helicopter strikes to try to take some of the pressure off of Phillips. Long story short, that night they were carrying some of their wounded out. They had to we couldn't even get in dust-offs during the day. They'd just get shot down. The ground fire was too heavy. So at nighttime, they brought in a dust-off, and Phillips led a small group with the out of the defensive perimeter at LZ Fox to this dust-off that had made it onto the ground without being fired on. And in the process, Lieutenant Phillips was shot in the head and killed. So the group killed the sniper, and then they loaded the dead body of Lieutenant Phillips onto the dust off, plus the critically injured, and it took off. And so the next day, the rest of the insertion of Charlie Company took place, and along with that, we were inserted, and we had no problem getting in. The next morning, it was actually the morning of the 8th. We spent one night at LZ Fox. Now, in the meantime, LZ Fox, the name had been changed to LZ Phillips in honor of Lieutenant Phillips that had been killed. And they also, that morning that we got in on the 7th, they started bringing in a battery of 105s. And so LZ Fox, or LZ Phillips, was now Firebase Phillips. And these were the 105s that were going to accompany us into our operations for Alpha Company as we went further into Cambodia. And about 3 miles from this LZ Phillips was a huge NVA complex, resupply complex. And our mission was to go and find this complex and destroy it. So on the morning of the 8th, we were headed out. It's a full company, maybe 140, 150 guys in 2 columns. And by late afternoon, going down this road, it was basically a road, we had a couple of sniper incidents. They're trying to slow us down. We actually made it to very short of this complex. And when we were on this road, trail that was covered over almost like a railroad tunnel, underneath triple canopy on both sides and trees overhead, you could see where there was a T. There was an intersection we were coming to. We were about 60 yards from it. Our captain took us off to the side, and we started to dig in. Now, this is late afternoon. And we knew that the trail that crossed over, that we were to go up there and take a left, and from there we would find this complex, which was not very far away from us. So we were digging up, circling the wagons, and the captain came by, 6, said, "Pugh, I want your squad." There was 8 of us. And he said, we were digging our foxholes, and he says, "No, I want you now." So we all grabbed our rifles, and I said, "What about a radio or a pig, an M60? He said, "Nope, we're just going down 60 yards to this intersection. I just want to check it out, and we're coming back." Well, as we started following him, he seemed like he was Captain Mitchie. He led us out, and we just got back on the trail that we had come down and continued on forward about 60 yards. And we got to this intersection. We were all in single file. Thomas Stanley was right behind 6. And then we had 4 or 5 guys. And then a man named Pickens was in front of me. Then me, and behind me was Paul. And we were all hugging this trail to the left. And we thought we were going to turn around and come back. And that's not the case. Minchie, our captain, forwarded us, and we took a left. And we went down the trail, and everybody's looking at me and everybody else saying, this wasn't part of the plan. And as we got down about 10, 20 yards, I'd say, we noticed the opening for this complex that we were looking for. And I told Paul behind me to make sure that nobody was behind us, because we were in a really exposed position. And the man in front of me, his name was Pickens. He was from New York City. He had 5 kids. Sad part about Pickens was he was a cook in the rear area at An Khe. They put a rifle in his hand and put him in my squad because we were so short of people. A long story short, we walked into this, we followed 6 across the trail and into the right, into this complex. And as we go in, it was just astounding. This complex was big. It had bamboo buildings. Some of the buildings were like 2 stories tall. But you couldn't see it clearly because there was still a lot of undergrowth and jungle in there. We were in the triple canopy jungle. And as he walked in, 6 took a cut to the left, and so we stayed on the left side. And on the right side, we could see this complex, and it was deathly quiet. And the shafts of light were coming down through the afternoon sun and lighting up the floor of the jungle that we were walking through. And in front of us is a very large tree. And this tree was one of the true triple canopy trees, a couple hundred or 100 feet high at least probably, and very, very wide around. And it had a huge root coming out of the side of it. And 6 and 5 of my guys had crossed over that root. And when Pickens right in front of me crossed over the root, this ungodly ambush fire from everywhere. They were the NVA. We had walked into an ambush, and the NVA were firing from the trees. They were firing from, looked like a trench on the right-hand side, and the worst thing was there were spider holes. There was 4 or 5 guys popping up, NVA soldiers popping up, and Pickens, who had crossed over this big root, had been hit, and he had been hit. It looked like by a man out of a spider hole that was about 20, 25 feet in front of us to the right a little bit. And Paul Spears and I fell down behind the big root, and that was our only protection at that time. And in some of my other podcasts, I go on in detail as to what happened, but basically what happened here, there was just this huge firefight going on. I and Paul I jumped over the root and picked up Pickens and pulled him back around the tree. And Paul crawled around the back of the tree after he had covered me. He had been firing at that, the man that was coming out of the spider hole. And he also fired into the trees. It was enough. You could feel the rounds going all around us. And then in the meantime, our first lieutenant, the 3rd platoon, Lieutenant Judah, had brought the rest of the 3rd platoon up, probably about another 30 guys, to support us. And they were just about in a tree line, just a couple trees behind us. So at this point in time, the battle really started to rage because we had at least 30 more guys firing, and it seemed like the NVA had more people firing too. And to make a really long story short, this battle lasted for about an hour. And in the meantime, 2 other guys from the 3rd platoon had made it up behind the tree where Paul and I and Pickens were at. And Snowball, the medic, he had tried to run around when he heard somebody call for the need for a medic up front. He had been shot in the throat. He came back around, and he showed me how to perform a tracheotomy on me. Another sergeant that had come up from the 3rd platoon with Snowball, he looked around, he got shot in the head, and he died. And in the meantime, the firefight, just the noise was incredible. The only thing that you could hear above the noise was the screaming of the wounded men. You could hear screams in front of us, and you could start hearing screams behind us. And in the meantime, a helicopter, a dust-off, had come down. He was trying to lower a stretcher. He got riddled with fire. And so this battle went on for, I'd say, about an hour. And the thing that brought it to a conclusion was the Angels of the Air. We had a Cobra gunship go over the top, and he unloaded everything he had, his rockets, his minigun that fired about 5,000 rounds a minute, and he had an automatic grenade launcher, and he was just ripping into the NVA positions below. And when he cleared off after he unloaded almost all of his ordnance, the next gunship came in. It was a Huey gunship with the same armaments, and he did the same thing. And it was after they left that the resistance from the other side noticeably came down. It was also starting to get dark at that point in time. And the decision was made for us to withdraw. Now, also after the birds had left, the Firebase Phillips, the 105s, they started just streaming in 105 rounds over our heads into the complex. And some of the rounds, artillery rounds, were hitting high in the trees, and we were getting shrapnel coming down all around us. And some of it was hot shrap. It was like burning pieces of metal shearing through the air, and you could hear it whistling by and hitting into the trees near us, and it would start little fires. There were smoke trails coming from that shrapnel. And so we had to get the hell out of there. And at this point, when we withdrew, it was, like I said, late in the evening, we had 2 dead that we had to carry their bodies out that were behind the tree with us. And we had, to my astonishment, 14 wounded in the group behind us that Lieutenant Judah had brought up. So we had 2 dead, we had 14 wounded at this point, and we drew back to the place where we had originally going to set up for the night. We brought the wounded back there. They set up they had set up another landing zone just across the trail from us, and that's where they brought in more ammunition for us because we had shot up a lot of ammunition, and they started dusting off the wounded. Now, also at this point, there's 5 guys in my squad that are missing and our captain. So we have 6 missing at this point. And so we're trying to get reorganized. And in the meantime, when they're taking the wounded out and the birds are going back and forth between Plagerang and our location here, a captain had been hearing the transmissions, and he had actually been a captain of Alpha Company before Captain Mitchie had taken over. He heard what was going on, and he got on one of the dust-off birds and came out, and he got on the ground and took over command of Alpha Company. When the surprising thing and the wonderful thing, 3 of the guys that were in front of me in my squad had managed to crawl to the left, and they, which was thick, almost impenetrable jungle, a wall of green. They had managed to crawl to the left and get out of this ambush that they were in. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And we were reunited. They had crawled back and had gotten back with our group, and they had moved back with us to this overnight place that we were going to stay. And we questioned them, and they said that, I said, had you seen the captain or Stanley? Thomas Stanley was one man, and a man by the name of Davidson in my squad, and the captain were missing, Captain Mitchie. And he said, yes, we had seen them. They made the mistake of crawling to the right. And that is where I'd seen that it looked like there was a trench, and that the NVA were firing. A lot of their fire was coming from that. And so my heart sunk. I just thought, well, that's where the NVA is at. And so we started to get reorganized. The captain was getting us reorganized. It had gotten dark, but you could see fires that were lit from the explosions and from the hot shrap. It was kind of glowing through the jungle where we were at. You could see, and you could smell the smoke also. There was the smell of cordite and all of that. And by this time, I'd say around midnight, we heard a series of gunshots. And I just knew that it sounded like our guys had been captured and executed. Well, the next morning, the new captain, he organized us. He sent a couple of squads around, circled around the trail that we'd originally come down, which actually landed them on the other side of the complex. And the plan was that we would assault this complex from the one side, and we'd set up ambushes on exit points that they found on the other side. And so, to make a long story short, when we assaulted and started our assault on this complex, the fire that we received was nowhere near compared to what it was the night before. And what it appeared what happened, the NVA had left maybe 4 or 5 snipers just to slow us down. Their main body had already left. And so as we moved in short order, we took over the whole complex, and all of the fighting had stopped. And that's when we found the 3 bodies. The bodies of Captain Mitchie, Thomas Stanley, and Davidson. They had been hogtied. We found them on their stomachs, on their chest, and they'd been hogtied with their hands and their feet tied behind their back, and they had been shot a number of times in the back of the head. They had been executed. And at this point, I just touched up and I felt that letter that was still there that Thomas Stanley had given me, and his prophecy of being killed in Cambodia had come true. And at that point, we were loading the bodies into body bags. Other guys had spread out, and they were blowing up some of the bunkers, and also gathering up whatever they could find, weapons and that type of thing, trying to stockpile of this thing, when all of a sudden more gunfire erupted. But in this particular case, it was from the far side, and we thought, well, maybe we had flushed some NVA out, and that a couple of ambushes on the other side, that the NVA had walked into that, and that was the case. Actually, what we found out was that we had flushed out 6 NVA soldiers, and they'd walked into our ambush, and our guys had killed them. And in examining the bodies, they found 2 M16s, and they found the special M16 that Captain Minchie had carried. It had a special stock on it. If you were an officer, you could have that type of have a stock on the M16. So I felt some kind of like a revenge factor, satisfaction that at least we had killed 6 of them, and it was kind of strange. But two of the dead 6 NVA soldiers were women, and that was very unusual. But this complex had been there for a long time, and I think they had some medical facilities, and these women could have very well been doctors or perhaps even nurses. And it was a short time after that I'd say there was only 2 or 3 more days that we stayed in Cambodia. There was no more combat. My last combat was on May 9th in Cambodia. And we were extracted out of Cambodia because Nixon had run. He was the one that ordered us into Cambodia, and he was under so much pressure back in the world that we were supposed to stay there. I think there were around May 16th or May 17th was our mission, but we were pulled out probably by the 12th. So the first thing I did when I got back to An Khe was that I went to the PX where we can mail, and I made sure that we mailed this letter. And so my story here basically is really about Thomas Stanley and the fact that he never gave me any trouble. He was a very good soldier. And now he had some incentive to do that because he needed to get an honorable discharge. But he never gave me any trouble. And he was in a number of firefights, both in Vietnam and in Cambodia. And he was very brave. He did his job. And I always wanted, in some ways, to know that to let his family know that he did his job, and he was a good soldier.
Did you ever get a chance to do that, to let them know that?
No, but now about 30 years later, I did go in while I was in Denver working. I went on a website again, the website for the wall, and I looked up his name, and I was very surprised to find out. I got a little bit of background history on him. He had left 10 siblings behind, 10 brothers and sisters.
Shoot.
And the letter, I don't remember who it was addressed to or where, but at least I sent the letter, and I felt like I had done what I promised him. But I just want to kind of honor him because he really helped us out.
Did you have a letter that you had written to your family that you gave somebody to carry?
No, I never did that.
You knew you were coming back.
No, I did not. I didn't think I was going to make it out of Cambodia. I'll tell you, the rounds were coming by my ear. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But then, I've got about 4 more stories.
Okay.
The first one, I guess that concludes.
I've got a comment. You were talking about the artillery and the shrapnel. That was from the artillery that we were shooting.
That's correct.
Through the trees.
That's correct.
It would have hot shrapnel coming down.
That is correct. Now, these rounds were actually, most of the rounds were going over us and a safe enough distance, and they were impacting inside the complex. But there were a couple of them that hit the trees above us or just a little bit in front of us, and the shrapnel was just flying out everywhere. And some of it was hot shrap, which was red and burning. And you didn't want to get hit by shrapnel, but you sure didn't want to get hit by hot shrap.
Yeah, while you were there, you didn't get any injuries?
I had no injuries whatsoever, except for the normal cuts and bruises and strains and bad back and bad shoulders. I mean, I was just extremely fortunate.
But you were talking too about snoring at night. They probably they were
Oh,
probably upset that you were going to alert the enemy.
oh, absolutely. I mean, the other thing that scared them the worst, that's when they told me to start sleeping up against the tree, which I did. And it did help with the snoring situation. And it wasn't until probably 96 or whatever I was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea and narcolepsy. So I was constantly tired in Vietnam. One time, actually, we were in a firefight, a small squad level, and we were down behind a log, and there was a lull in it. I fell asleep, and the guy up next to me kicked me. Goes, "Hey, do you mind? We're in a war here." But the thing that really scared me about falling asleep was on guard duty when it was just me. I could not sit down, and I couldn't lay down. Of course, I pace. That was the only way that I could assure that I would stay awake. So that was kind of my story there. The next story, if you don't mind, was now this is Cambodia. I'm going back into Vietnam probably in the end of February or March, and this story I call ambush. Now we were a company-sized unit, 140 guys, and we were on the side of a mountain, and we were probably 100 yards up from a huge trail. I'm sure it was a Montagnard trail. It was actually like a highway for them, and you could see that the NVA were using this trail. And in this particular instant, where we were at in the Central Highlands, there were no Montagnards. That was their natural land. They had been relocated to about 11 different camps outside of the Central Highlands. So where we were at, it was regular NVA infantry units and regular Army infantry units, and it was called a free fire zone. And the motto was, if it moved, kill it. And it was about the fairest way you could fight a war. But anyway, we were 100, I'd say, yards. Squads that we had sent out had found this trail earlier in the day. So 6 had us circle the wagons about 100 meters, I'd say, above this trail. And then he ordered a ambush to be sent out. Well, now this is the first ambush I'd ever gone on. There was about 7 or 8 of us. We took 2 pigs, 2 M60s. We had all kinds of claymore mines. We had a lot of grenades. And of course, we had extra ammo for the M60s that the grunts carried. And we had a lot of extra bandoliers of M16 ammunition. And what we did, we went down about, I'd say, 70 yards or whatever on a trail that went down to the main trail. And what we did, about 10 yards above the big trail that we wanted to set up the ambush for, it was, some of the trees had lightened out a little bit, and you had free lanes of fire right down onto this trail. So what we had done, we dug 2 big long foxholes, and we put 2 M60s facing straight down the hill to this trail. And then we had gone down near the trail, and we put claymores in the ground, and we also put claymores in the trees. We strapped them to the trees. Now, the claymore had about 7.5 pounds of explosive in it, and I think it had about 700 BBs in it. And it shot out, it was kind of half moon shaped in a way. The front part said face towards enemy. I always loved that. Thinking we were that dumb grunts. But anyway, it said face towards the enemy. And then what you did, you screwed in a blasting cap into the top of it. And from it were electrical wires that came out. And you took those wires back from, if it was strapped to a tree, it didn't matter which claymore, you took the wires, and the wires at the very end, they were long wires, had a clicker. And all you had to do is take the safety off the clicker and pop it. And this thing would blow out in about 160-degree arc. And it would just absolutely obliterate anything in front of it. So we had about 10 of those out. And they were all facing the trail in case we catch somebody coming down the trail. And I think it was on each end, we also put out trip flares. Now, this is towards the end of the day, and it's starting to get dark. We've got our trip flares down there. And then we had something that I've never seen before. It only happened one time with me. Of course, I only went on one ambush. It was called a thumper, or we called it a thumper. And what it was like a plastic electronic spike. It was probably about 6 inches long. It had kind of a rounded, pointed end, and it was about the size of a quarter, and it was packed with electrical sensing gear. And it came up about maybe a total of 7 inches. And at the top, maybe the top was about the size, the main part that you stuck in the ground to register and record vibrations was probably about the diameter of a quarter. The top part was probably about the diameter of a silver dollar. And you could actually, if you wanted to, unscrew the top. And if you look down in it, it was all electronic devices and wiring. So what we did down at the left end, I think it was, you just pushed the thing into the ground with your hand, and there was about that much sticking up. And what it did, it recorded ground vibrations. And so there was like an ear pod, and we would go back up after we got everything set up. The trip flares, the claymores are in place, the wires are all brought back to the two foxholes that we have. The M60s are pointing down, they're ready to go, and it's starting to get dark now. Well, when you put this earphone in, the thumper would make a periodic thump, thump, and that it was, maybe 4 or 5 seconds apart, and that just lets you know that there was nothing there. But now, if the thumper started going thump, 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 it was recording vibrations, and that meant something was coming towards you. So we start out in the first of the night, just as it got dark, and we took turns. Well, my turn was probably around 3 o'clock in the morning, but around midnight, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Platoon. They have a scene in there where they go out on a night ambush, and it starts raining. Well, somebody turned on the spigot. I mean, the rain was like monsoon-like, and I forget what time. I don't know if it was monsoon season or not. It doesn't matter. It was a monsoon type of rain, and it just came down, and all we could do was take our ponchos, which had a hoodie on it, put it over the top, and wrap ourselves up and lean up against the tree and put our M16s under the poncho, and the water came down so hard you couldn't see 2 feet in front of your face. You couldn't hear anything. The guys with the M60s, they had covered them with ponchos too, and we'd covered up all the electric detonators, and there's nothing you could do. And it was just, I would say the only word for it was misery or miserable. And when you got yourself all wrapped up like that, it gets real hot on the inside, and you start sweating, and it was just terrible. And I'd say somewhere after midnight, maybe around 2 o'clock, it rained maybe for 45 minutes to an hour. And then it just, like somebody turned the spigot off, it just stopped. And then you had all of the rain trying to make its way down, all of the thousands of leaves and the drops coming down on you. But at least you could open up your poncho and get some air. I mean, we were just, it just was stifling. And then about 3 o'clock, it was my turn. The guy came over to wake me up, but I was already awake. I hadn't really fallen asleep. And so I went down and sat between the two foxholes. And the M60 guys were right behind me. They were all wrapped up in their ponchos. Everybody was trying to get some sleep. And and you didn't want to put your feet in the foxholes. There's about 6 inches of water in the bottom. And it was just kind of miserable. And anyway, I put that earphone in, and I'm hearing that thumper go thump, thump. And I got to be careful because I've got the sleep apnea and all that. Didn't know it. And all of a sudden, my heart starts pounding because this thumper starts going off. And it's like thump, 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 until it's just a constant noise. And of course, I'm scared to death. My heart is just pounding. It felt like it was going to come out of my chest. And I'm hitting both of the gunners on both sides and say, hey, we got company. And so everybody's waking everybody up, and we're all getting, the gunners are ready. They've pulled everything off. They got the M60s ready to go. Everybody's in the foxholes ready to shoot down. And all of a sudden, on the left side, a trip flare goes off. So we start popping claymores. And I mean, you could hear all kinds of noise down there. We could hear muffled noises. We could hear like screams. But we were firing. I mean, the M60s were unloading down there. All of our M16s, we fired off almost all of our claymores. And a couple of guys even threw a couple of grenades down there. And then our sergeant, who was in charge of the ambush, said, ceasefire, stop. And it was all the cordite, and you could smell all the gun smoke and all of this. And it was just dead silence. But we did hear some, it sounded like moaning. And so, but it was dark. And, it was, by this time, it was probably maybe like 3:30 in the morning or something like that. And, of course, on the phone, we had a horn, a prick 25, 6 calls. And he goes, what's going on? He wanted an update. He said, we don't really know. Something walked into our ambush and we let him have it. And he said, don't move. Don't go down there. I'll bring the rest of the company down at daybreak and we'll check it out. And that's what they did. When the daylight came, we couldn't see anything. And so when 6 got there with the rest of the company, they sent a squad of about 5, 6 guys down to see what had happened. And one of the guys on the radio of the 6 guys who went down there said, breakfast is served. And 6 goes, what the hell are you talking about? He said, well, your ambush just killed a wild group of feral hogs. I'd think they're feral hogs. They were large. I think what they were probably the Montagnards. They had hogs, that raised them and for food and that type of thing. And I think that when the Montagnards were taken out of the jungle, probably these were probably their pigs that turned feral. And we had blown the living hell out of them. And one of the guys said, the bacon is ready. There was parts of pigs all over the hanging in the brush and everything back there. And I'm telling you, 6 looked at us, he just rolled his eyes back. And it took us about a couple of weeks to overcome that. And me and a couple of the guys that were in the ambush, we came to call it the making bacon incident. So that was my story of the ambush. But I want to tell you, up until the fact that it was pigs, it was a scary situation. I really thought we had some NVA visiting us, but that wasn't the case.
That's the challenge of not being able to see anything that's coming.
Oh my God! You just got to go by sound,
But then you gave away where you were to the enemy.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, we did. Now we didn't fire all the claymores, but yeah, we did. But that's what happens, I mean, that's just what happens when you're out there. Now, my next story I call Firebase Volcano or Anthill, or something along those lines, because this is the strangest fire base. I don't know the name of it. But what happened was we were out in platoon size, and I think Lieutenant Judah was still our first lieutenant at that point. Now, this is back in Vietnam, probably in late February also, or early March. And we had been inserted into the high jungle, high mountains. And this was just kicking our butts. I mean, we got the 60, 65-pound rucksacks, and we're going over one ridge line and the other. We've been out for a week and a half. We haven't fired a shot. And we are kicked. Tensions nerves are on edge. Guys are starting to fight and fuss and argue about things. And I think Lieutenant Judah just decided we'd had enough from the mountains. I mean, it was just brutal, the steepness of what we've been operating in. And so he arranged with the captain who was in charge of this fire base that was actually the fire base of it had a battery of 105s that were covering. They were covering for us. If we needed artillery, that's who we called, and they would give us support. So because of the situation and how beat up and tired we were, he decided that he was going to take us into the fire base and let us get a couple of hot meals and we spent a couple of nights there. So that's what we did. We came down out of the mountains and we're on a ridge line, and looking right down, there's the volcano. It was real conic-like, or it looked like a giant anthill. It was just a strange place, and it was not volcanic. I couldn't see any volcanic rock, that type of thing. It was just strange. And on the ridge line we were on, we're looking over. It's a little bit above us, and it's about 100 yards across, away from us. And as I'm looking down, it's real steep. We had to go back and forth to get down to it. There's about 100 yards of, they had cleared out all of the brush down underneath there. And there were 3 separate lines of concertina wire, barbed wire, razor wire, all around this thing. It was like a giant anthill where the top had been, the engineers had flattened the top, and they had flown by helicopter the 105s and put them in kind of a circle up at the top. And then at the bottom, you could see all these bunkers, and then spaced up above all the way to the top were bunkers. It almost looked like people living in caves. And so when we got to the bottom, it was about 100 yards. We had to go through the concertina wire, and there was a small path that you could do that. So we were single file walking in, and in the middle of this cleared out area, there was a low spot where you could see a dry, kind of like a dry riverbed, and you could see that maybe in the monsoon season, this is where all the water came down, and then it flowed on down. But what was really amazing was about 100, 200 yards to the left of us, the mountains all ended, and it became this great rift valley. It was just a huge valley, and on the other side in the haze, you could see another huge mountain range going up. And actually, if you were on this fire-based volcano, as I'll call it, it was really kind of a breathtaking view. It was kind of striking. And the backside of this volcano, so to speak, it dropped off too into that rift valley. So we were kind of like out on an elbow on the very end, and it was just, from a geology standpoint, I have no idea how this thing got created like this. But this was our fire base. So we got in. We were told to split up. We could go, and they wanted 2 guys to a bunker to help out with the bunker duty and that type of thing with the guys that were at the fire base. And there wasn't much shrubbery or anything, and you could see where there was a lot of mud tracks. And then when this place looked like it became an absolute quagmire when it rained. But I was assigned with another guy to a bunker about halfway up this volcano, so to speak. And I could see right above me the 105s. You could see them, and sometimes they would have a fire mission, and they'd be firing from up there. You could also see where the angles where the cannon were, they could actually lower them if they needed to. And I thought it was a strange place for a fire base because right across was that ridgeline that we just came off of, and the NVA I thought could easily just stage a strike from there. Of course, they would face the 105s. The 105s would absolutely annihilate them. But this is where we were at. And when I was sitting, I was told this was my bunker, but I would not get in a bunker. I don't like to get I have claustrophobia, and I don't like to get in a sleeping bag, let alone a tent. And I certainly didn't like the bunkers. Plus, the bunkers that I stayed in one night in Cambodia at LC Phillips, or Firebase Phillips, had scorpions in it. And I'll tell you what, there were a lot of other creatures that lived in those bunkers, and I wanted no part of it. So I put out my bedroll on top and slept up there. Plus, you got the fresh air, and when it was daylight, you got this wonderful view out to the right. I mean, it was just incredible. And but the one thing, we got hot meals. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is just wonderful. We just didn't get hot meals. And that was part of the reason Judah brought it back. Judah brought us back into the fire base, was give us some hot meals and a little bit of downtime. And so, but the one thing that they warned us was that if you saw a red flare at night go off, you had better crawl in to a bunker, because what it meant was that they were going to lower the 105s and fire what they called the beehive rounds. Now, the beehive rounds, I guess, were like thousands of darts. It was like, so basically the 105 unit turned into a shotgun. And they put them, I don't know how low they came to the ground, but I know this, if you were standing up, you'd been obliterated. So we've been warned about that. So we're about I'd say the second night there, and I'm sleeping on top of the bunker, and all of a sudden I see the red flare. I went, oh shit, I'm gonna have to crawl into this damn bunker. And believe me, I crawled in there as fast as I could with my weapons, and left my bedroll and everything up on top. And sure enough, down below, some of the bunkers that were first line of defense had opened up. M60s had opened up onto the wire. And the word came back that 3 or 4 sappers had been spotted trying to come through the wire, sneak through the wire, and they'd been found. Well, about the time that the M60 started firing, they'd already called the guys on the 105s. They already had lowered their cannon barrels, and man, they started blasting down into the perimeter on all 360 degrees around this volcano. And I mean, I would not have wanted to be out in that. You would never have survived it. I mean, it just ripped up everything. And then the strange part that added just a strange feeling, the luminary flares started going, and they were shooting out the flares that lit everything up, the flares, and they were coming down. There must have been 10, 20 of them at one time, just coming down, drifting in the dark, and they were drifting back and forth in their little parachutes, and that created this view on this ridge that we had just come down of movement. I mean, there's light moving back, shadows moving back. I mean, to me, it lit us up more than it lit up any enemy. But that was the nature of the whole thing. And eventually, all the flares stopped, and it was just dead silence. Now, the next morning, we saddled up, and we're headed out. And there was, in fact, 3 or 4 sappers, maybe 5, that had brought up satchels of explosives. I guess their object was to go up to the top, if they could have made it all that way, and blow up the 105s. That's all I can think of. But as we were walking out, we came out the same little path through the concertina wire. We looked off to our right, and a lot of the wire, the engineers and the grunts were out there repairing and putting up new concertina wire. And in the wire, you could see what looked like body parts hung there, just hanging. You could see a little bit of tissue, looked like bone, and fabric from their fatigues. And I just thought, and nobody said a word. All we did, everybody looked right and looked at that scene. And I was just thinking of those soldiers, those MDA soldiers. I mean, how courageous could you be to attempt something like that? And I had a lot of respect for them.
That was like a suicide mission. I mean, there wasn't any way they were going to survive.
There was no way. And once they were spotted, the M60s probably would have taken care of them. But we put icing on the cake with the 105 beehive rounds, man. I'm telling you. And no, go ahead.
No, I just said that. My goodness, that's just terrible to have to fight a war like that, just to run right into the concertina wire and then face all the machine guns.
Yes,
and the 105s.
Now, how much time do we have? I've got another couple of stories.
We've come to an end now.
Okay.
We'll have to get you back again, because your recollection is so vivid to me. It just, you bring this story to life, like you can imagine what's happening all around you. And it had to be in that moment, had to be terrifying and exhilarating and every kind of emotion you can imagine all at once.
Yep, it was. I don't know if I have one. I'm not telling a story. I just want to give a shout out. Now,
Okay.
if I could, in our for what it's worth department, it took me 23 years to get a college degree, and from that you can ascertain that I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And it's only, and I say that to say this, only within the last 5 or 6 years have I started to realize the contributions that women made in Vietnam. I was, I guess, combat arrogant. I was in a lot of combat, and I saw what modern weapons can do to the human body. I saw a lot of terrible things, but there were 2-week periods, sometimes a week and a half, where we never were in a fight. And if we were in a fight, it was usually small units, like 10 guys and us, 10 guys and them, that type of thing. They were very short fights, very deadly, very up close, and very short. And all of a sudden, I started realizing that these women, especially the nurses, they face the worst of the worst 7 days a week. I can't imagine what they went through, and I just felt so ashamed that I didn't even understand their role until the last 5 or 6 years. And I just want to give a shout out to all those nurses. I can't believe what they saw, the amputations, the smells, the death. I mean, I don't know how any of them made it out of there and back to the world without some severe psychological baggage, because they saw stuff, and I just can't believe what they did. And also, there was only one case where I saw this, and that was the donut dollies. And on Far Base Arnold's Trail, they brought in a couple of musicians to play guitar, and they brought in 3 Red Cross ladies, the donut dollies. And I mean, it was a sight for sore eyes, and they were just so pleasant. And I mean, it was just wonderful. And I remember the musicians, just as a side note, the song they were singing, and I'd never heard the song, Me and Bobby McGee. So, and I just remember that. But I just want to give a shout out to the service and the sacrifice that all of our women made in Vietnam and Cambodia.
Well, don't be surprised, Bill, if you don't run into some more donut dollies late in life, because I think we're going to have some at roll call.
Yeah, we're trying. We're
I
trying.
would love to meet them. I would love to meet them.
Yeah.
Give them a big hug.
Yeah, when we had them on the show, it was pretty incredible what they did and how they helped the morale. And that's what you've just talked a little bit about, but it's a whole team effort, and all of you guys, and I think it's so great that you're willing to share the way that you do, because there are probably 100 times people that are out there, combat veterans, that are still not willing to talk, and they're carrying so much inside, and it's eating them away. And it's so much better to me when you can say, listen, once it sees the light, it's not so scary anymore. And I cannot, I think about when I get something on my mind and I'm asleep at night, and I wake up for some reason, and I start thinking about something, and I think and think and think. It keeps me up all night. If I just get up and write it down, I don't think about it anymore. And I could imagine that in obviously far more extreme situation. But if you can write about it or talk about it or something, then it's not something that you're just thinking about all the time.
Right. This is like therapy.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
There's also a point that I think that maybe I'm going to get to where I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
In a way.
But I looked up Thomas Lee Stanley on the wall, just barely over 21 years old. And, you sending that letter to his family had to mean an awful lot to them to get that letter.
Yeah. I sure hope so. And I hope it got to him.
I'll bet it did.
Got to them, I mean.
I'll bet it did.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for being such a great guest every time that you've been on. And, it's just more stories that we have to share. with our audience, and there's other Vietnam veterans out there that subscribe to our channel that listen to your stories, and hopefully it spurs them to want to tell their stories.
I sure hope so. And I still have a couple of guys that were in Vietnam. Both of them were door gunners, and I'm still trying to convince them to come and tell their stories. And I thank you so much for letting me do this.
Well, it's always an honor and a pleasure to have you on our show.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And we will see you at Roll Call.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully I don't have to direct traffic this time, Bill.
That was wonderful. You have so many different hats, Mary.
Bill comes
when I showed up for roll call this last time, Mary was out there directing traffic like a traffic cop. Oh, that's great.
She's got a lot of talent, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Right, bye-bye.
Man, his stories are so vivid.
And they kind of stay with me, and I just think about, how did they feel? How did they function like that? Because they'll be out for 30 days, without change of clothes or anything, and then come back.
They're not taking a hot shower, brushing their teeth at night, and putting on a clean set of clothes. When he talked about the hot meal, they weren't eating frequently, and they definitely weren't eating hot meals.
Yeah.
And just to think about how that had to be. Oh my.
You never knew what was around the next corner,
Man. Holy cow.
Well, roll call, at first I thought, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people show up because of the parking situation, but it looked like a lot of people showed up because it was packed. So
yeah, it was definitely not as we were still missing quite a few that did RSVP. I know that there were some folks that had contacted some of their people and said, hey, parking's bad, don't come, which is a problem because we already turned in food numbers. So we're buying that food whether they show up or not. And I think the church did a good job of finding places to park people, because for those that don't know, they had a group of 1,200 that they host once a year that was there for that Friday and Saturday. And so they had all those cars coming in the parking lot. Then they had all of our people, our 500 with our veterans and our volunteers. And they had to figure out where to park them. And that's not their normal amount of people to park. And so they used golf carts, and they had people out there directing traffic. They had people parking everywhere they possibly could. And I think that they did a good job managing that situation. If I had it to do over again, I'd have said, let's move up a week. Even though they didn't ask us to do that, I probably would have asked to do it just to make it a little bit more comfortable. But and Brenda's team, think about, they were doing multiple things for that group of 1,200 with, different stations of food out for them and everything, and doing our group. So I don't know how they managed it, but they manage it all the time. It's always amazing. And it's so good to see all of our friends. We probably had 8 or 9 of our World War II guys there. So our Korea group is, of course, our smallest. We had a lot of them there. But it was a really good lunch. And
we celebrated 3 World War II birthdays too.
Yeah, we were supposed to do 4, but one of them didn't make it. 2, 100, and 199. So Carlisle Hayes and Mel Summerall turned 100. And then who was our 99-year-old? Doggone it. Now it's Jack Stowe. That's right. And Jack, did you see Jack Nye, who we celebrated last month, his 100th birthday? He showed up, and the last time we saw him, he was either in a wheelchair or he was in a wheelchair last month.
Yeah.
This month he was using a walker and he was walking. He had just come from therapy. So I said, Jack, you're getting better. Look at that. It was just amazing. But he always has this great smile on his face, and I love to see him. So it was a great, great day. And our speaker, John Bagwell, the DJ that we had on here with Kelly Krager of the Texas Tech Vietnam Oral History Project moderating. Kelly does such a great job. Everybody talked about how wonderful he was and how well that flowed. It went really good. And he told the stories that he told here on our podcast. So if you missed the lunch and you missed our podcast, go back and look for the one with John Bagwell. It's a great story.
Very good. Yeah. Somebody that wasn't in combat.
Wasn't supposed to be a combat veteran, right? Just like Bill was just talking about. These people that are not meant to be in combat that,
Roll call this month is what day, Mary?
October 24th, and the RSVPs will open on the 13th, and they filled up in 10 hours last month or in September. So I guess we're still on the 30th of September. So if you want to get in for the lunch, you need to RSVP on the 13th. And if you don't get in there and it fills up, then you get on a wait list. And I was able to clear the wait list. So most months I can clear most of it because folks don't know about doctor's appointments or funerals or anything else that happen, and then they cancel so I can fill those seats. But 500 is a lot of people.
And to find out more about roll call, you can go to roll-call.org and learn more about it. If you'll go on there and sign up, then you'll get the newsletter. And whenever the newsletter comes out is when the reservations open up. So you'll have a good shot if you open your email early to make a reservation.
Yep. Or like I say, you just that morning go to this website Rick has right here, roll-call.org, right there on the home page. RSVP for the lunch and click the button, fill in the information, and that's all you got to do. So you don't even have to wait for the email.
And that's on October the 24th, and October the 25th is Skyball, the Air Power Foundation Skyball, one of the great premier events of the whole year, and it's going to be at Globe Life Field. If you'll go to airpowerfoundation.org, you can find out more about the organization. You can find out about the Skyball, and you can get tickets, or you can just donate. So a lot of fun things coming up, and we're getting ready for Veterans Day in November, and there's a lot of organizations, schools, and civic groups that want to have veterans come and talk to them. Well, you can go to, is it information at roll-call.org?
Info@roll-call.org. Yep. And two of the schools the middle schools are an all-day event. So that's something that we really need folks for, because a lot of folks can't get away for the whole day. And then we have some other organizations that just looking for a morning or an afternoon or something. But it's all based around like about the 4th through the 12th of November, during that time frame. So if you have a story you want to share and you have some time, yes, definitely email us at info@roll-call.org, and we'll get you plugged in.
And I've already asked Bill Pugh to come to Sterling's school over at Trinity Basin, right across from Roll Call, and he's gracious to come there. He just can't tell the rude lizard story.
Yeah, there's probably some of his stories that he probably shouldn't tell those kids.
Not to the 4th and 5th graders.
No, they'd have nightmares.
But we love our veterans and love to have them go out in the community and share especially with the students out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank everybody for being a part of this podcast today. It's good to have us. Last week we were kind of out of out of commission, and the week before that, Mary was with Don down at the Nimitz Museum. And so
It's been a while since I was here. I had so much stuff going on.
I know you're gonna have to tell your story one day about all the places you go.
Yeah, well, maybe one day I just tell my story. It's not a fabulous heroic story, but we all have a story, and every story matters.
That's right.
What I tell people all the time.
Well, we will see you next week on Hometown Hero.